All right, good morning, everybody. It's good to have you here. Good morning to everyone, especially all the Taylor Swift fans in my life. I can't tell if y'all are having fun or genuinely unraveling. We will ask our in-house Swiftie, Jeff Ulrich, here in just a moment. I'm Emerson Lotzia. You're watching The Sweat presented by DraftKings. We'll price check around the NBA because you guys and gals really need that. Which DFS and sportsbook plays our analysts are chasing around the NHL on the ice. Plus, Jason Tardik, built by the Bachelorette, talking to Gary V and Jesse Cofield about which bet he likes for his Buffalo Bills this week, the same Bills team that failed to beat the Jaguars last week. Anywho, speaking of NFL bets, DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich and Kenny Ducey are here to share their favorite ones ahead of the Sunday main slate. So Jeff, first things first, did you even sleep last night? I can't imagine the feelings you were feeling after Taylor Swift dropped an album at midnight.
Oh, that's what you were tweeting about. I mean, I look, I wake up early in the morning. I did sleep, and was able to get myself to sleep. But I mean, waking up to your numerous tweets about Taylor Swift, I mean, I'm wondering what's going on. So great to fill me in. Very excited.
Yep.
I'm sure my kids will be excited.
Yep, that's great. Awesome.
Anyways.
Yeah, we're really proud of you, man. Now go ahead and do me a favor and tell us who your favorite team is to cover the spread this weekend.
Just wanted to make sure we were transitioning to football here. Okay, my favorite team week 10, it's going to be the Carolina Panthers, plus 10.5 underdogs. I get it. It's PJ Walker. This team is going up against the Cardinals. All things considered, Kyler a little bit healthier, but he's still not 100%. This is the Cardinals team who's been run on a little bit over the last 2 weeks. They got off early against the San Francisco 49ers. But as we talked earlier in the week, I don't really know if the 49ers are a good team to gauge against right now. They just have so many different holes on defense. It looks so good one week and then so bad the next week. This Panthers team plays at a very slow pace, and so do the Arizona Cardinals. They have Christian McCaffrey back. PJ Walker, at least, is a mobile quarterback, at least a little bit more mobile than Sam Darnold. And look, in his one start last year, he completed over 70% of his passes. I think you're going to see a little bit of a rink-and-dink offense from Carolina. I think they're going to keep this game slow-paced, and I think 10.5 points is just too big here for a team that's got a pretty good defense and a Cardinals team that isn't 100%. So I really like the Cardinals to cover that 10.5 right now.
Okay. Panthers have not been great covering the spread, 1-5 ATS in their last 6. Kenny, tell me which team you think can cover the spread this weekend. You're pretty confident in.
Yeah, I'm really glad Jeff said that, because now basically I have a free hit here. I could just say whatever I want, and it's going to sound more rational than the Panthers, right? And I'm really happy, that you said that, because I want to take the Jets plus 11 against the Bills. Look, I've been saying it for weeks now, but ever since Michael Flohr moved to the booth, this offense has been a revelation. It's a different offense. And you know what happens with bad teams with big spreads? We take the favorites to cover double-digit spreads because these bad teams just have terrible offenses. That's why they're bad, right? Because they have terrible offense. They can't move the ball. Look, the Jets are going to start Mike White in this one. It doesn't really matter who starts, right? Josh Johnson had 3 touchdowns against the Colts. I just think the Jets are going to score enough points to stay in this football game. The Bills' defense is not good, right? They're probably on the same plane as the Colts if we have to rate them. So I think that the Jets here, if they just score 20, 25 points, will cover an 11-point spread. This defense has been horrible, and that's the only liability you have here. But Josh Allen just couldn't score a touchdown against the Jacksonville Jaguars. No offense, Emerson. So I don't know. I think that perhaps this is a really tight game. And go back to last year or to 2 years ago even, when the Jets were starting like Mike Kafka, or wherever they were starting at quarterback. They were still covering the spread or nearly covering the spread against the Buffalo Bills. These teams historically, over the last couple of years, have played very close games. So I think that something here, there's something to be said about the Bills playing down to the Jets, this Jets offense surprising them, and I think they cover the 11 points.
I mean, if you guys thought my spread was bad, wait till we get to the underdog picks. That's all I can say.
Okay.
So.
I mean, Jets 2-6 ATS this season. They have a negative 13.4 point differential. That's really bad. Like, it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's true. It's good math.
Last 2 weeks, though, their offense has been very good.
You're on to something, and who's under
all about
center.
That booth, baby.
That's true. Mr. Mike White, the living legend. Okay, Kenny, take me now to your favorite game to go over.
I'm really looking at this Saints-Titans game just because this Titans defense, I also want to bring it up because I know Jeff wants to talk about the Titans. This Titans defense is not good. I know that they've showed improvement over the last couple of the last couple of games. But I still think that this Saints defense, or Saints offense rather, has something to be said. Trevor Siemian has played pretty well And ultimately, this Saints defense has been the biggest disappointment for me over the last couple of weeks. I don't like what I'm seeing. The Titans are going to throw the football a lot here without Derrick Henry. We know that. And I do think that this Titans offense is good. And I think that Ryan Tannehill is a good quarterback and he has decent pass catchers. I think this game could go over. This is a very low total, and I just think it's going to be a very pass-heavy game. So for a very pass-heavy game, especially one where maybe the Saints fall behind early, I think that this is one that should definitely go over the total of 44 points. I think it's a little too low.
Jeff, you are Johnny Over, so tell me which game you definitely feel confident that the over will hit.
I mean, look, Kenny kind of stole my pick here because I do think this one is too low as well with Tennessee, New Orleans. Tennessee's defense, we need to give them a little bit of credit. I mean, it's the team that's held like the Chiefs, the Rams to like under 10 points in 2 of their last 3 games. But I think the Saints have the offense to kind of counteract what they're doing. They're getting a little bit more pressure with Alvin Kamara. And like Kenny alluded to, like I don't think Trevor Siemian is really a downgrade off of Jameis Winston. That's kind of my hot take, I guess. But I think that 44 point is just too low. The Saints defense also hasn't been that good. So that's kind of my favorite. But I mean, I know this is the big total on the board is Atlanta-Dallas, but I still like going over in this game. Matt Ryan's played really well. He's completed over 75% of his passes in 3 of his last 4 starts. You've got a Dallas offense here going up against an Atlanta Falcons defense. Gets no pressure. Dak Prescott's going to be sitting back there picking things apart with CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz, whoever he wants to throw to. I think Dallas could put up 35 points in this one, and Matt Ryan's playing well enough. I think he gets the over. It's a big total, hasn't really moved from 54.5. I'm still leaning over in this Atlanta-Dallas game. 2 fast-paced teams, 2 good offenses playing well right now.
Yeah, it's the biggest total right now on the Week 10 main slate, dude. Jeff, how about one then to go under? Your favorite game to go under, Jeff, is what?
Yeah, it's going to be the same pick as my spread pick. It's Carolina, Arizona. I mean, it's 44.5. It doesn't seem like a big total. If Pierce was here, he'd be like, well, it's an NFL game. It's only 44 points. This is an easy R. Pierce isn't here, thank God. We've got a rational person in Kenny Ducey. But these are 2 slow-paced teams. They like to run the ball. And I think, again, you look at the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray's still not 100%. DeAndre Hopkins not 100%. They are looking at this game as let's just get a win and get out of here. I think you're going to see a very conservative game plan from both sides. Again, you've got the Panthers with P.J. Walker, a guy who just, in his one start, he completed over 70% of his passes, but it was for like 6 yards per attempt. This isn't a guy who's going to be chucking it downfield a lot. They're going to be running Christian McCaffrey. I see this one as an easy under. 2 good defenses, 2 slow-paced teams. I think that 44.5, I'm surprised it actually hasn't moved to a lower number yet.
Okay, we have a few folks behind the scenes who are very confused right now and worried about you. Did you just say Kenny is rational?
I did, yes, I know. It's a hot take. I'm just full of hot takes.
Wow. This is Friday.
Take.
This is
I'm also using Pierce as the comparison. Pierce Dietrich, the guy who likes to bring up a Ross Dwelly every show. So, I mean.
Dude, that's like immediately what I thought of last night when the Ravens lost. We talked about it on Twitter.
You talking about Ross Dwelly?
No. About like Pierce being like every team that loses is just a terrible football team. So I was waiting for him this morning to be like, the Ravens are a terrible football team.
They are terrible.
Okay, Kenny, is your favorite game to go under terrible?
Yeah, I just think that teams that lose generally are terrible. No, I'm gonna go under here on the Packers Seahawks game. Look, this is a defense, right? The Packers defense, we've seen it now over the last few weeks. I know that the Chiefs offense is actually probably bottom half of the league at this point, but they played really, really well last week. They kept them in that game with Jordan Love at quarterback, and they've been really, really solid. They've been near the top 10 in DVOA against the pass. So I think that they're going to do a decent job on Russell Wilson, who could be pretty rusty coming off this long layoff due to the finger injury. And on the other side of the coin, I know that the Packers love to throw the football, and the Seahawks secondary is one of the worst in football. But I also think that we've seen the last few weeks they really want to try to establish the run. The Seahawks do have a decent rushing attack in terms of stopping the run. So I think that this game, at least on one side of the coin, the Seahawks probably don't score that many points. And I do think that maybe there's also some rust with Aaron Rodgers if he does indeed play in this one. The Seahawks defense also, for what it's worth, has looked decent the last few weeks as well. Maybe they're improving just a little bit in the secondary. I just think that this is too many points to lay here, especially. I know that the names, right? You look at Russell Wilson, you look at Aaron Rodgers, you want to just lay the over here because they're 2 of the most talented quarterbacks in the league. But I do think that with Chris Carson back with the Seahawks, they're going to want to try to run the ball. I think the Packers are going to try to run the ball as well, try to ease Aaron Rodgers back. So I could see an under here.
Let's go favorite underdog outright. Jeffrey.
Yeah, this is where we really dial up the crazy here. I'm calling my shot. The Detroit Lions get their first win of the year this week. They are sitting there at around plus 270 on the DraftKings Sportsbook. This is honestly, you look at this spot and you have to at least get interested. Pittsburgh coming off a short week. Detroit coming off a bye. They've got the extra rest. We saw what happened late in that game. Pittsburgh just refuses not to drop Ben Roethlisberger back 8 yards. The Bears ended up with 4 sacks in that game. Their defense almost won them the game late. I think Detroit can do something similar. They're not bad against the run. And the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line has proven time and time again this year, they're not good at running the ball. This is a team that's bottom 5, bottom 10 in terms of yards per carry. The Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to throw the ball, and they're likely not going to have Chase Claypool back there, who hasn't played well anyways. So it's just going to be Deontay Johnson. You limit Deontay Johnson, and all of a sudden, maybe one defensive play. I think the Detroit Lions are very, very live in this game. It really just comes down to Pittsburgh not being that good and being very banged up. So it sounds crazy, but I think if Detroit, if you look at the rest of their schedule, if they're going to get a win, it's coming this week. And I think at plus 270. There's actually a little bit of value on them here.
I mean, the problem is Lions have lost by an average of nearly 10 points.
The problem
on
is
the road.
the Detroit Lions. I mean, that's
right. No, I get it, and you're just answering the question. I respect that, and thanks for playing along. Kenny, what about you, man? Favorite underdog to win outright?
Yeah, I'm not going to go that crazy, but I'm going to go with the Las Vegas Raiders against the Kansas City Chiefs at home as the underdogs. Look, we've seen. I know that Pierce yelled at me yesterday because I brought up seasons past, right? But the Raiders, they've historically played the Chiefs pretty close over the last couple of years, and I do think that this Chiefs offense is really, really bad. And again, we've talked about the defensive problems for this team, right? In the secondary, allowing these big pass plays, these big chunk plays. What about the offense? Patrick Mahomes is missing throws left and right that he was normally hitting last year. Something is very wrong with him. I don't trust him against this Las Vegas defense, which has been pretty average against the pass and against the run. But I think that that's good enough in this scenario because the Chiefs defense has really been that bad. We've seen secondaries like the Giants stymie the Chiefs. So look, Derek Carr made some terrible decisions against the Giants last week. I know they didn't look that good, but this Chiefs defense has made worse quarterbacks than Derek Carr look good. I think that the Raiders come out fired up. I think that they get this big win. And the Chiefs, for the last 2 weeks, the way they've played, did not deserve to win these games. So if the Chiefs lose 2 in a row coming into this game, I think that the Raiders are probably favored, and I think that you're getting a decent price here because the Chiefs technically did win the last 2 weeks, but they really won very ugly. They didn't play good football games. So I think the Raiders actually come out here and they've looked stronger over the last really 5 or 6 weeks and win this football game.
Kenny, bring us home with your favorite player prop for the Week 10 main slate on the DraftKings Sportsbook.
So I was looking at the Packers-Seahawks game because I want to take Aaron Rodgers overs. They're not listed yet. So I'll say that I want to take the over on Aaron Rodgers passing yards, especially when it opens, because I'm sure it's going to go up against this awful secondary. But I will also take the Russell Wilson under 244.5 yards. Chris Carson is back, folks, for the Seattle Seahawks. And we know what Pete Carroll likes to do, right? He likes to run the football with Chris Carson. He doesn't care that he has a Hall of Fame quarterback in the backfield. So I think that Chris Carson's going to get a heavy dose here. And I think that Russell Wilson, you might see a little bit of rust coming off this injury. I like the under 244.5. It also helps that the Packers have been very, very good on the defensive side of the ball.
All right, Ulrich, favorite player prop, please.
Yeah, I like going to this Dallas-Atlanta game again. I mean, I think you've just got a ripe, sort of scenario for these two offenses to get off. Amari Cooper a little bit banged up, and I think that just leads us to CeeDee Lamb over 5.5 receptions. Against Atlanta, again, they just don't get pressure. Dak should be sitting in the pocket all day, should be a little bit more accurate because of that. It's plus 105 to go over 5.5 receptions, which I really like. Lamb leads this team in targets. He's coming off a bad game, too. I think there's going to be a big bounce back from Dallas's offense here. So, you can target a bunch of guys here. There's a couple other props, but I think this one with CeeDee Lamb over 5.5 receptions at plus money again. I really like in that one right now.
Jeff, you are just getting started on this show. Need to find out which guys you are splurging on in DFS. We know you like to make it rain, kid. And young Kenneth, help us out with those NBA lineups, please, right after Adam Koppen and Nick Eatman break down Big D's Week 9 disaster against the Broncos, and then also looking ahead to Sunday against the Falcons.
Well, sorry to report the 6-game winning streak for the Dallas Cowboys is over, and surprisingly at the hands of the Denver Broncos. Let's get into it with Nick Eatman, a guy who watches this team close. He's covered the Cowboys the last couple decades. I am Adam Kaufman. And Nick, there's a lot to unpack here, obviously, as it relates to this loss. I mean, it was 30-0 in Dallas, with Denver leading that game in the fourth quarter before a couple of touchdowns that obviously in the grand scheme of things didn't really matter there in the last handful of minutes. How do you explain what went down here?
It was in Dallas because it didn't sound like it. It sounded like it was Denver. It didn't look like it either. Very orangey look to the stadium. But obviously, what happened was one team dominated the other. And, the snowball effect, I think, that happened early in the game. I thought it was like when you're playing Madden against the computer and you're like, I'm not kicking a field goal. I'm just going to go for it. And then I'll stop them. And if I don't stop them, then I'll score the next time. And if we don't score, then we'll just score the next time. And it didn't happen. It just kept snowballing. And before you look up, it's probably pissing off the Broncos. Like, oh, okay, you guys can think you can just do whatever you want. And it just didn't work. One thing led to another and to another and to another. And they couldn't. When you don't run, block, tackle, hit, block a punt, when you can't do anything right, it's not going to be your day.
Nick, Atlanta's posted a subpar offense, even worse defense to this point in the year. Now, normally, obviously, if we're talking about the Cowboys being as good as we've been saying over the last couple of months, this is very clearly a spot where they bounce back and win kind of going away. But what do you expect for this one?
I think it'll be a blowout for the Cowboys. I really do. And if it isn't, then I'll be surprised like I was this one. I think it will be just because of the nature of the league. They got out hit, they got out hustled, they got outplayed, they got outclassed, they got out coached. Every person on that team in the coaching staff should know that. I mean, they got it handed to them, and if that doesn't, if that sits well, then there's a problem. So I think that there is no way Atlanta sneaks up on them this week. And with Dan Quinn being the defensive coordinator, Atlanta fired him last year in the middle of the season. Mm-hmm. He's got something for this game as well. I think the Cowboys are a better team. I think they've got more talent, and they're playing. This is a game that they will probably bounce back. So it smells like a game that they'll win and win convincingly. It's the NFL. It's hard to win by more than 10 points, but this is a game I think that they will.
Cowboys defense has a lot of fantasy points this year, and a lot of those picked up on takeaways, returns for touchdowns, that type of things. But as we know, this Dallas defense has its holes, has its issues. The run defense has been a little bit suspect. So is there a particular player you think on that Atlanta side, that offense, that is going to be especially problematic here?
Yeah, the tight end. The guy that everybody thought the Cowboys would want to draft if he fell to them, he didn't. Kyle Pitts is a generational type player, and I think that he's a guy that could give them problems. They don't have a lot of other guys, but they do have a former MVP quarterback, a veteran, seen a lot in this league. But Denver didn't have a lot of those playmakers either. They didn't have a lot of guys you were worried about. And they got it done. And so, including from their quarterback. So this league, everybody can make plays. There's guys out there, but tight ends have always given the Cowboys a little bit of problems. Just because, do you put a linebacker on them? Do you put a safety on them? They're just mismatch problems. And Pitts is a mismatch nightmare. So, that would be a guy I think you have to look at.
Cowboys, we got more coming up for them next week. We'll see what they do with Atlanta here first. Nick Eatman, always a pleasure catching up with you, my friend, and here's to getting back on the winning track.
All right, let's do it. Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone, we have got ourselves an NBA panel here to talk about the NBA. So DraftKings contributor Kenny Ducey, welcome back. Matt Meiselman, good morning to you as well. Let's price check here, guys. Favorite DFS plays in the following price ranges on tonight's 11-game slate. So let's start in the $10,000 or higher department, Maddie.
I don't actually think anyone up here is underpriced necessarily, but there are a couple guys I like. And the one that jumps out to me in particular is Nikola Jokic. I think that most people are going to be aware of Jokic being suspended for one game because of what happened with the Heat. That's not really factoring into my decision here. It's more that I think that a lot of the popular value plays will be centers. We have Tony Bradley probably starting for Nikola Vucevic. We have Isaiah Stewart being really cheap. Jared Allen has been a really popular center play recently. So I think that people just aren't really going to get to Jokic. He's very expensive tonight. Maybe he is a little extra fired up because of what happened a couple games ago. But either way, I think that he's a good guy to pay up for.
Okay, who do you got to pay up for in this chunky price range, Kenny?
Hey, you want to talk about a guy that's going to be fired up? How about the guy that sat almost the entire fourth quarter as the second unit came back? And look, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be highly motivated here or extra motivated, but Julius Randle is going to have a lot of energy. Julius Randle's not a guy that gets to sit on the bench a lot. If you remember last year, one of the league leaders in minutes played, Tom Thibodeau loves to run him into the ground. Just 27 minutes last game because he sat on the bench while the second unit played and came back. So against the Milwaukee. So look, I think that Julius Randle here, he's fresh. That's something that you don't normally get to say about him. And he has a great matchup here against the Charlotte Hornets, who are third in pace and third to last in defensive efficiency. They're very, very weak inside. They don't rebound the basketball well. Miles Bridges and Mason Plumlee, just not known as big, imposing bodies. I think that the Knicks sort of bully the Hornets in the front court in this game, get back to playing that defense that we saw them play last year. And I think Julius Randle has a pretty big game. It's hard to knock taking Randle, considering he has a usage rate of 31% or more in 3 of his last 4 games. You know he's going to get the ball when he's on the floor. It should be on the floor quite a bit here. Should be well rested for a change. So fire him up at 10.2K.
Kenny, between 8K or 9K then? Who's your guy?
So this is a theme. I like pace and I like bad defense. I think everyone who plays DFS likes that, right? And Damien Lillard at $9,800 has that here against the Rockets, who are second in pace and 19th in defensive efficiency rating. In 5 of the last 6 games, he's had 43 DraftKings fantasy points. He's been one of the most consistent players ever since his terrible start shooting the basketball. I think that his consistency mixed with his matchup is going to make him a very popular play. So I might kind of steer away from him in GPPs. But if I'm playing a cash game, I really like firing up Damian Lillard. I just think he's a very good play. Maybe not the highest ceiling play on the slate, but certainly has a pretty high floor here and should definitely still hit value even at $9,800 with this matchup. I really, really like it.
Matt, what do you do here between the $8,000 and $9,000 department?
So Nikola Vucevic is going to be out for the Bulls, and the Bulls' 2 leading scorers now are DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. Both of them are priced between 8 and 9K. I think LaVine is probably going to be a little bit of the more popular option. I think both guys are good choices, though. I'm leaning towards DeRozan. It's mostly just that I think that he's more similar in what he does to LaVine. He scores more on the inside. LaVine is more of a perimeter player. And I mean, the opportunity is going to be there for both of them. The Bulls are just missing a lot of usage with Vucevic not being in the lineup. Tony Bradley is not much of an offensive player. He could be someone to save salary with, but the Bulls are going to need scoring elsewhere. And I think DeRozan and LaVine pick up the slack. Both are good options, and I'm just leaning slightly towards DeRozan.
Okay, we're heading south even more. 6K or 9K, Maddie?
So we're waiting for news here, but Tyrese Halliburton missed the last game that the Kings played. They were not good in San Antonio against the Spurs, but they have another good matchup. The Spurs defense was lacking without Jakob Poeltl. Didn't matter. The Kings were still pretty bad. But now they're playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, chance to bounce back. And I think Buddy Hield in the mid-range is someone that no one's going to be thinking about. He just hasn't been very good lately, hasn't really been good this season. But because of the way he plays, where he just is launching threes all the time, there is upside for him. So assuming Halliburton's out, I think Hield is actually one of the better plays in the mid-range. And especially if that news comes after lock, I think the ownership is going to be really, really low on him too. So I kind of like this whole Sacramento side. If guys like Halliburton and then even Terrence Davis are out, just opens up a lot of minutes for everyone. We actually saw Hield start last game. He's started a couple times when Halliburton hasn't played this year. So I think we get that opportunity again. Hield is a pretty good play.
Kenny, price check for me in the salary range, please.
Yeah, I'm going to go with John Collins at $7,100. Look, you look at the last 8 games, he's at a floor of 30 minutes, and now no DeAndre Hunter, no Bogdan Bogdanovic, or potentially anyway, no Bogdan Bogdanovic or DeAndre Hunter. I think that could definitely open things up for Collins if one or both of them sit. 35 minutes last game. I know that the Nuggets are not the best matchup. They're one of the best defensive teams in the league. But I think that both these teams should be in for an absolute battle. Matt mentioned that, Nikola Jokic maybe comes out fired up here. I think the Hawks have something to say on offense, and I also don't think that many people are going to just run after John Collins here, considering he's had 2 bad games in a row. They came against Utah and Golden State, 2 very good defenses, and I know you're not really getting like an upgrade here with Denver, but I do think that John Collins is a very talented offensive player, and he probably garners more usage than the low usage rates he's seen over the last, I would say, 10 or so games if both these guys sit. So I'm waiting on the injury news, but I think $7,100 is a really good price to pay for a guy that could easily get you 30 or 40 fantasy points if the scenario is right with his minutes.
The pride of Cardinal Newman High School, John Collins. Kenny Ducey. Under 6K, dude.
Yeah.
Save us some cash. Find us some value, Kenny.
Frank Kaminsky, $5,500. There's no DeAndre Ayton, or he's doubtful, so we're expecting no DeAndre Ayton for this game. 46.8 DraftKings fantasy points. His last time out, he played 31 minutes. We know he can shoot the ball. The matchup is not the best with the Grizzlies, but it's also not the worst. They're kind of a middling defense, so I think that Frank Kaminsky is a pretty solid play, and he's going to be a pretty popular play as well from a value perspective if there's no DeAndre Ayton as expected.
All right, Maddie, how about you, dude?
So a couple of news situations. Kenny actually mentioned the Hawks with Bogdanovich and DeAndre Hunter, both questionable. They both didn't play last game, and Kevin Huerter, who's still only 4K, was really, really good. I think he got to 42 fantasy points. So he would be a really appealing option, especially if Bogdanovich doesn't play. You have Cam Reddish there. So I think those are the guys to save salary with in the Hawks situation. And then just one other situation to mention. If Draymond Green doesn't play, he missed most of the second half last game. I think it was with a leg injury. You have guys like Otto Porter Jr., Nemanja Bjelica, who are both in the $3,500, $4,000 range. So any of those guys, depending how the news breaks, I think could be pretty appealing.
All right, Slate Approved Pick time. Favorite DK Sportsbook bet, Matt?
So an hour ago, the Minnesota Timberwolves were plus 3.5 against the Lakers. That line is only 2 now. I still kind of like it. I mean, this can maybe just be for future reference for people. I'm very anti-Lakers right now. I didn't think they were good with LeBron, and they certainly aren't a good team without him. So maybe just if you're going to bet against the Lakers, you have to get in earlier. One other game I'm looking at is if Brandon Ingram returns for the Pelicans. I think that he does enough to make them at least a competent team. They've really struggled this year. Even without him, I feel like they should be better than what they've been. They just lost at home to the Thunder, but I think they turn it around at some point. This team does have some talent, but especially if Ingram comes back. They're getting 9 points at home against the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, they still don't have Kyrie Irving. I think the Nets are good, but that's a little too much respect for them if Ingram plays, so that's a situation to keep an eye on also.
Kenny.
You know what I'm going to do here, right? I'm going to take the Knicks money line at minus 125, but I think I have pretty good reason to do it. I think that, the Knicks, they haven't really been healthy in the front court, and Nerlens Noel and Mitchell Robinson have sort of alternated games where they've played. I think that tonight probably is the night where both do indeed play, which should give Taj Gibson a much-needed rest here. Taj Gibson is, a great guy to put in there for 10 or 15 minutes. He's not going to lead your front court defense. I think that the Knicks here, with a solid front court, should bully the Hornets, who are very weak in that area. Cody Zeller, not a very good rebounder. I think that if they can take control of the front court, they can defend inside, and they can ultimately get some extra possessions for their offense, which has been very, very good. And I think that they can win this game against the Hornets. It should be a very fun game. I also really do like the Timberwolves, like Matt. Hate the Lakers. H-A-T-E, hate the Lakers. They're terrible, and they probably lose this game against the Timberwolves. I'll probably take them on the money line, to be honest, Minnesota.
All right, thanks, dudes. Maddie, Jeff will join you for a healthy dose of splurge or save coming up. Kenny, we'll see you later. Feel better. Have a great weekend. But right now, first, we got Pat Mayo breaking down his favorite plays on the Week 10 main slate.
Let's talk DraftKings slate for this week. Main slate, obviously. So just the millionaire slate on DraftKings. If we're going to stack, actually, let's start here. Dearness Johnson, provided Nick Chubb and Felton don't play this week. I saw Brian Hill was potentially picked up as the backup for this game, and we haven't seen a lot of guys recover in time if they've tested positive to play that Sunday, if it happens anytime during the week. $4,700 for Dearness Johnson. Looking at the optimal percentage, still early in the week, still on a Thursday, he is in 32% of optimal lineups so far. He makes essentially every lineup work. How popular is Dearness Johnson going to be?
Yeah, I mean, early on, like 35% ownership is what I'm seeing on him right now. I think the name, people saw him on Thursday Night Football, but I think the name maybe keeps him a little bit less than this is if this was an Alexander Madison that we got this news on in a similar price range right now. But he's going to be really popular. He looks really good. I tweeted earlier in the week, I think I'm going to play 100% of him as of now. It's a tough value week, like as we go through this in general, and you'll see like through expensive stacks or just really expensive running backs all up top that you're almost trying to find value. And then we get this one thrown into our lap. So I'm going to just try not to overthink this one. And yeah, $4,700. And in that game, he played like 70% of the snaps. And that was with Felton playing 30%. Now there's no other running backs on the roster. So we just hope that he can find the end zone or catch a couple passes so he doesn't absolutely go busto. But I think he looks good.
You know, there is a pivot point from him if everything breaks the right way, because there's two other running backs that are essentially value running backs based on what their projected role is going to be this week. One is James Conner against Carolina. Obviously, Chase Edmonds out 4 to 6 weeks with his high ankle sprain. Maybe Eno Benjamin ends up taking the Chase Edmonds role. I mean, that's a possibility. I wouldn't say it's a distinct possibility. In fact, I would say that's an underdog to happen. So if you can project James Conner for 85% of the snaps, he's only $6,300. Carolina's not the best matchup in the world, but it's still fine. Or if Stevenson and Damian Harris are out, which they might be, Brennan Bolden's only $4,400 in that same game with Dearness Johnson. So you could pivot off of Johnson and use Bolden, who I think is a worse play, but he's not going to be 35% owned. Or that could be like your mini correlation stack. Just play those two running backs and a $4,700 running back, a $4,400 running back. What can't you do with your lineup at that point?
Yeah, I agree. And Bolden, I mean, they gave it to him last week, the touches. There's nobody else active. JJ Taylor and his opportunities, it doesn't seem like Bill Belichick fully trusts him. Bolden's a guy that they just trust. Like, they're already giving him touches. They put him in the James White role, which is such an important role for that offense for years. And now it looks like he can probably transition, if these concussions are going to keep out Stevenson and Harris, to some sort of role there for a 12 to 14 touch, maybe even more, all the passing game work. It looks nice. He's actually shown like good stuff on film in terms of having some sort of burst for a 30-year-old. And then even another name that's potentially on Wednesday, Zach Moss, he's also in the concussion protocol. Singletary led all running backs in week 9 in the NFL with routes run. He saw 8 targets. Week 1, we thought he would have that sort of role with Zach Moss inactive. And then we see Matt Breida come in and take on 30-40% of the snaps. I don't think that's going to happen this week, as Singletary has actually looked good. He was running as the 1 last week for most of the game, when it was actually before the third, fourth quarter, when Zach Moss came in, got a couple of touches, and then got concussed. So I think Singletary is another name at that like exact same price point as Johnson, who could be a pivot if it works out.
Could be. So we have all of these options that are cheaper options at running back. What do you think this is going to do to Christian McCaffrey? And I mean, Alvin Kamara is potentially dealing with an injury. We don't know that. If he misses the game, all of a sudden, I mean, as much as I hate Mark Ingram, he becomes an excellent value on this slate. Like, Jonathan Taylor has about the best matchup that you can get. Like, will expensive running backs just be wildly overlooked this week?
Yeah, I don't think they'll be overlooked. I think it'll condense on a couple of them. And it'll be interesting because like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had like 2 or 3 expensive stud running backs on the slate. And you're like, all right, well, one of them is going to garner some ownership. And if we got this value, it would just make all of them highly owned. But now it's like every stud is on the slate. We'll see what happens with Kamara, but you have JT, you have Dalvin Cook, you have Eckler, Aaron Jones, Zeke, all these guys, and McCaffrey up top. So right now, I think people are going to probably flock to Najee Harris. Chase Claypool's status is in doubt. Najee in general, seeing like 25 plus opportunities a game, week in and week out, even if he's not efficient, he's just getting the work, almost 7 targets per game. So if people start to flock there, and he projects out nicely, that's where everybody else around him starts to become somewhat of a leverage. And yeah, I mean, McCaffrey's going to be my first priority. I mean, the guy was like quote unquote limited, and he had 18 touches for over 100 yards total. And in a bad week, it doesn't matter who his quarterback is, what the game environment is. He's great. We all know that. And he's always 9,000 plus, and he's not that this week. So McCaffrey plus Dearness Johnson seems like an obvious way to start a lot of people's lineups this week. But right now, early on Thursday, it seems like people are flocking more to like the Najee Harris range than going all the way up to McCaffrey, flocking more to the Devontae Adams range at wide receiver than going all the way up to McCaffrey. So I lean McCaffrey, especially, I mean, if he just stays 15% less owned somewhere in there, that's where I'm going to lean.
All right, we did the NFL Sportsbook thing earlier. Now let's go ahead and see what's cooking over on the DFS side ahead of the main slate on Sunday of Week 10. DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich and Matt Meiselman are back. This segment is called NFL Splurge or Save. So are you paying up for a top-priced option on the main slate or saving some cash with a value play? So, Jeff, what's your strategy? What are you going to do at quarterback? You want to save or you want to splurge?
I guess this is more of a saving option. I mean, we're not going like to the bottom of the barrel. Like, you know, Pierce would probably be rostering a third string quarterback for this year for $4K, but we're going to go sensible $6K with Matt Ryan here. Again, we love attacking this game. I mean, it's got a 54.5 point total. The Falcons are in a spot here where they should be throwing 40 plus times. I mean, they're already averaging around 37 pass attempts per game. Matt Ryan, a little bit of an underrated story. I mean, he's playing pretty well. You just look at his fantasy card there. I mean, over 22 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 starts, 76% completion rate against one of the best pass defenses in the league last year. You know, this Kyle Pitts thing's starting to work out. They're spreading the ball around. And I think the biggest thing is just using Cordero Patterson like the weapon that he is. So I think it's a great game environment for Matt Ryan. I think that you're going to get lower ownership on him than Dak Prescott. And I think there's a better chance you see 40 plus pass attempts from him in a game where there just could be so much garbage time or just like crazy prevent defenses that I think Ryan's going to get there. And I really like pairing him with Cordero as well.
He's gone under 16 fantasy points just twice this year and has the Cowboys, who are giving up over 20 fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. Jeff Ulrich, you might be onto something. Matt, what are you going to do at quarterback?
So just as a caveat, we don't know a lot about this situation yet with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like who's going to play wide receiver this week. So having said that, I actually really like Tom Brady, and especially if Chris Godwin is in, because I think if some Bucs guys get ruled out, the field is going to gravitate towards this situation where we have a lot of underpriced receivers. But if Godwin plays, I just think people are going to be scared to play Godwin. He's been dealing with an injury all week. No one's heard Brady's name in a while. I feel like he hasn't played in a few months, but it's only been 1 week. But I think that this is a little more expensive than people are going to want to pay. I think a lot of other quarterbacks are going to be a lot more popular. So paying up for Brady, I think, is a pretty contrarian move. And at least in the last couple of years, anytime Tom Brady is an unpopular pick, I think that that's really worth taking a look at.
Interesting. Well, what about at running back, Mr. Meiselman? You going to splurge or save?
So I don't like playing the highest owned player of the week, but Dearness Johnson, assuming he's starting with all of the other Browns running backs being out, I mean, he's too cheap at 4,700, where I almost think you need to have him. I guess it's probably a neutral matchup against the Patriots, but with the workload he's likely to get and with the price tag, I just think you have to play him. So this is not an exciting pick. I think everyone in the world is going to know to play Dearness Johnson this week. But I still think that you just have to play him. So I'm not getting too cute with this one. Just play the guy who is substantially underpriced.
Okay. Jeff, running back, please, splurge or save?
I'll do a semi-splurge here. I mean, this is a week where I think you're going to see a lot of lineups like trying to double down on the big names. I mean, we have McCaffrey healthy. We have Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, Eckler. People will be trying to get up there, but I think one name that kind of just drifting under, maybe even just because he's under 7K, is Aaron Jones at 6,900. I mean, it's a fantastic matchup against Seattle. I mean, this defense, you know, they've maybe stiffened up a tiny bit in terms of against the rush, but they allow a ton of receptions to opposing running backs as well. And again, I mean, you know, you're looking from a strategy standpoint. I think teams will be, or DFS players will be happy to get back on Devontae Adams here, assuming Aaron Rodgers gets cleared, if he hasn't been already, and I've missed that news. But, regardless, I think Jones is going to set up as potentially like a good leverage play. I don't think he's going to be as highly owned as Devontae Adams. And then again, this is his lowest price point since I believe week 1 of the that we've seen him on a main slate. It's a really, really good player, having a really good season. Again, the Seahawks just allowed, Alvin Kamara to go for like 150 yards receiving or whatever a couple weeks ago. Not a good defense in this spot. I think Aaron Jones can clean up here, and at under 7K, I think he's a good upper tier value.
Okay, then at wide receiver, is there someone you're going to save on you also believe could bring some value to the table, or are you just saying, screw it, man, I'm going to splurge all over this guy?
No, screw it. Let's just keep splurging. I mean, let's loosen the purse strings here. I can't talk. It's my 5th segment. CeeDee Lamb at 7K is where we want to go. I just want to keep attacking this Dallas-Atlanta game. I feel like people are going to get just a little bit too fancy and not go all in on this game, and I like that. CeeDee Lamb, again, you've got Amari Cooper coming in, hasn't practiced in full this week. Lamb leading the team in targets. He's got a yards per reception mark that's 2 yards better than Amari Cooper. All things considered, he's been the explosive play here. And, I mean, Atlanta, they just don't bring any pressure. They're just not a defense that's really going to slow up this Dallas team at all at home. I think CeeDee Lamb coming in at 7K, people might say, oh, well, that's just a little bit too expensive. I'll just try and get up to like Devontae Adams. But, again, you're going to game stack here. I think Lamb is the way to go here.
What's the way to go at wide receiver, Matty?
So I'll give one from each side because I actually agree with the CeeDee Lamb call, and I think Amari Cooper is probably the guy on this team that most people want to play. So I think playing Lamb with Michael Gallup, who saves a lot of salary, Gallup should be back this week. That combination I like a lot. So if you're stacking Dak Prescott, I think those two receivers ahead of Cooper just because of what the field is doing, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then one other guy to throw in, if you're going with the Tampa Bay game, I think Terry McLaurin is expensive enough at 7,600 that if you have the salary for him, he's definitely worth paying up for. There's always upside for McLaurin. If you look at his game log, he's been pretty inconsistent this year, but the 25 plus fantasy point games are there. They're just mixed in with some duds also. But I think if no one's going to really be playing him, which it looks like they aren't, then you can kind of just bet on him having one of those big games again. So I like McLaurin too after that Cowboys game.
Tight end. I mean, Jeff, this is when you shine. We joke about it all the time, but you're pretty good at, plucking out those hidden gems. So are you once again saving? Or are you going to splurge for a dude at tight end?
I mean, yeah, this is my wheelhouse, right? Every now and then the blind squirrel gets the nut, and that's me when we get to tight ends. But I don't know why people aren't more excited about Dan Arnold, especially in this spot. I mean, it just seemed like I just kind of figured his sentiment would be getting higher now. It's a player averaging over 7 targets since he's hit the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
I mean, that is big stuff. That is heady stuff in the tight end world where, we're scratching for guys who get like 4 or 5 targets and they're like $4,000 or $5,000. Arnold's basically matched Dalton Schultz's production in terms of volume. And then you've got Schultz up there, who I do like this week, but he's 5K. Arnold also has a great matchup here. I mean, the Colts, this is just a team you love to target, not only with tight ends, but just in the passing game in general. I mean, yards per reception, pass attempts against by opponents. And then you've got the Jaguars. They've averaged 40 pass attempts per game over their last 3 games. 3,500, it's just too cheap for Dan Arnold. And again, if you're looking to save money, maybe you just want to get in on all these expensive wideouts, or you're looking to stack like 3 expensive running backs. Arnold is the guy who's going to save you quite a bit of money, and I don't think he's going to get up there in sentiment at all because it's Jacksonville. Sorry, Emerson.
Yeah,
but,
no, it's fine.
I think he's still too cheap, and I think he's still underpriced here.
Dude, he deserves your attention 1,000%. I do all of this research week in and week out on Jaguars players. He has 17 targets over the last 2 games. He's caught 12 of them, 128 yards, even without a touchdown, everybody. The man is a tight end 4 over the last 2 weeks. It doesn't get any better than that. Maybe a little bit, but not much better. Mac, it's tough to find someone who can match the quality product that Dan Arnold is in the tight end department.
Yeah, so the only thing I disagree with is that no one's going to want to play Dan Arnold. I think everyone's going to wind up playing Dan Arnold. I agree. It's an underpriced. He's a guy that has done well recently. And I think ultimately when we see what the lineups look like Sunday afternoon after 1 o'clock, we're going to see Dan Arnold right up there maybe with Kyle Pitts as one of the most popular tight ends, if not the most popular for the week. The other guy I think people are playing, and I kind of want to go to the other side of the game, is Pat Freiermuth. The Steelers have some wide receiver injuries. Freiermuth is coming off a really big game against the Bears on Monday night. I think TJ Hawkinson on the other side is just not someone who's going to be very appealing, because if you're playing that game, you're probably just saving with Freiermuth. Hawkinson was hurt for a while. He had a few games, actually a long stretch of games with just not a lot of production whatsoever. The last 3 weeks, though, he's up to 31 targets across the 3 weeks. He hasn't gotten in the end zone, but he's caught 24 total passes. I think the upside is definitely there. And I think at his price tag at 5,500, this is just not someone that people are going to get to. So Hawkinson, I don't know, maybe beginning of the season was someone who was a very appealing tight end pick. And I think everyone's kind of forgotten about him. So that's my guy for this week.
Well, you know who has not forgotten about him? That's Jeff Ulrich, because he said earlier in the show, right? The Lions, they're going to get their first win. Dog winning outright on the road in Pittsburgh. And maybe Hawkinson will be part of that picture, Jeff.
Hey, I like it. I mean, I'm serious about that call. I think the Steelers, as we saw, they take a lot of sacks. They're banged up, coming off a short week. I don't know if that's crazy.
And the Lions coming off a bye. Most of these teams, minus the Jaguars, are okay or maybe a little better when they come out of a bye. Okay, Matt Meiselman, you're done. One more block to go, one more break to go. The Jeff Ulrich Show will continue when Paul Bruno joins him to talk NHL, DFS, and sportsbook plays. Before we do that, let's check in with Jesse Cofield and Gary Vee and their guests this week. Jason Tardik on DK's Die Hard Dialogue podcast. So his fiance is one of the hosts of one of my favorite shows on the planet, The Bachelorette. Each week, Gary and Jesse, they break down the Jets game with a diehard fan and pick a bet they like for an odds boost over on the DK Sportsbook. You can watch the show, by the way, on the DK YouTube channel to see what bet they boosted and the play in the Die Hard Dialogue Viewer DFS contest. Do not forget, that is a free-to-play contest every week, folks. The winner gets a football card from Gary's personal collection. It's a Saquon Barkley autograph card this week. Here's a bet Jason Tardik likes for his Buffalo Bills as they head to New Jersey on Sunday.
But here's what I like about your bet. What I like about your bet is I always analyze the public bet versus the actual money, where the sharks are going. And with the over right now, I think you're seeing, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're seeing about 50% of the public on the over, and you're seeing over 80% of the money on the over. So anytime the public and the sharks are doing something different, I love to jump at it. The biggest concern I have with that is you nailed it. The Bills defense is number one. And whenever you have a number one defense against a Jets number 31 defense, I think you could run into some serious issues with just time with the ball. And so I think that Buffalo Bills are going to be very strategic this game. They're going to be coming out firing after being so humiliated last week that I think I would personally take the Bills team total over the total game. And I believe if you could give me a line on the team total, I think it's 30 and a half. Does that sound right?
Let me find that for you.
Okay. So that's
yeah, you're right.
Be hammering. Is that right? 30 and a half?
Yep.
So either I'm going to go Bills first half over team total or Bills overall team total. I just think when you see defenses that stacked against one another, we're going to have time of possession for a significant amount. And I think we're just going to come out absolutely fired.
Last block of the show, everybody. We're going to do that sticky puck thing. We got DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich and RotoWire's Paul Bruno in the house for some NHL opening face-off. Debating your favorite DFS and sportsbook plays on tonight's NHL slate. Got 5 games cooking on the menu. High-priced DFS play. Who's your guy going to be, Mr. Bruno?
You have Matthews against the Calgary team that's on the second of back-to-backs with a backup goalie, Daniel Vladar, for $9,200 and Draisaitl for $9,000 in a matchup against the Reeling Sabres. Those are 2 high-priced and solid options, but for me, it's got to be Connor McDavid against Buffalo for $9,400, only a tick above Draisaitl's price. Best player in the league versus a team in Buffalo that is looking like one of the worst teams in the league. Exactly what we expected at the beginning of the year. The Sabres have gone 0-4-1 in their last 5, been outscored 22-13. The numbers are going to get worse after tonight.
Yeah, highest player on the slate. You like him on back-to-back nights then. Jeff, what about you, dude?
Yeah, I'll try and save a little bit of cash here. I mean, I do agree with Paul. Like, you're going to want to get exposure to some of these fantastic matchups. Also, Ovechkin on the slate. But I think the better options are Matthews or going to the Oilers studs. But I like Patrick Kane as well. 7,500 going up against an Arizona Coyotes squad. I mean, this penalty kill, their special teams are just so terrible that I think that at 7,500, Patrick Kane's averaging almost 5 shots on goal per game this year. I just don't know how you get away from that. He's been a little bit slow offensively the last couple games, but like the chances are there. Again, this Arizona, I can't even speak enough about it, but they looked terrible the last time out against Minnesota, allowed 5 goals. Coming in here against Chicago, I mean, on the road, Patrick Kane, I think you got to pay up for him, and then you pick and choose between the rest of the guys that Paul mentioned.
Paul, you're spending so much money, again, paying up for McDavid, highest price player on this 5-game NHL slate. So now you got to give me some value. You got to save us some money, but also hopefully it delivers some points for us.
Absolutely. And I'm looking again at the game in Toronto. It's a Hall of Fame game tonight. There's going to be lots of stars watching, and you can bet all the skaters are going to be juiced about this. So I'm looking at Calgary's Andrew Mangiapane, a great value play when you consider this is a guy who's got 7 goals and 2 helpers in his last 10 games played. He costs only $4,400 and by far is the most productive player in that less than 5,000 range with 10.7 DraftKings points per game. If you go with a top-tier center, as we highlighted above, with either McDavid, Draisaitl, or Matthews, Vinnie Trojek might be a nice compliment too, guys. He has 11 points in his last 10 for Carolina, one of the top teams in the early going in the entire league. He gets a favorable home matchup against a Philadelphia club that is badly overmatched in this game. Trojek costs $5,100 tonight.
All right, Jeffrey, value play, please.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that you can be keeping, stay looking at the Chicago Blackhawks here. Kirby Dack at 4,100. Again, I mean, a pretty solid player down the middle, getting power play exposure. He's had 7 shots on goal in his last 2 games. Again, it's the Coyotes. So all the Blackhawks here are just heightened offensively a little bit. I also don't hate looking at a guy like Martin Necas at 4,000. It's not the greatest matchup. I mean, I'm not like super bullish on goals for this game, but Necas is really, really cheap. He gets that top line exposure in Carolina. He's just a good team. He is a game time decision, but I mean, if he does play 4,000, you're just getting, again, top 6 exposure to a guy on a solid team. So always good value when Necas is there. And I'll stay with Shane Gostisbehere as well at 4,800. I mean, he's just producing. He's under 5K. If you need a cheaper defenseman, man, I mean, I think you just stay on him as well.
All right, let's go over to the DK Sportsbook here. You guys have mentioned that Blackhawks game a couple times. Coyotes, plus 200. Fattest plus money you can get here on this slate. Who wants it, Jeff?
I do not want it. I made my shot with the Coyotes like a week ago, and yeah, that was the one shot. I'm done with that. But I do like a team that's actually fairly close to them in the odds. It's the Philadelphia Flyers at plus 160. Again, Carolina's not a team you want to pick on long term, but this spot is interesting. They're coming off a really tough and well-deserved 2-1 win against the Stanley Cup champions in the Tampa Bay Lightning. But now they're returning home. You've got a Philadelphia team who's just getting really solid goaltending. I mean, let's give Carter Hart some credit. He's had a really good bounce-back year. They've improved a little bit defensively as well. They're a little bit better depth pieces. I think this is a spot where they could catch the Hurricanes off guard. I'm definitely expecting a closer defensive game. And, at plus 160, like you look at the trends, too, for Philadelphia versus Carolina. They're 5-0 against the spread in their last 5 games when playing against Carolina. So we don't look at spreads and stuff as much in hockey, but these two teams have played close. They've played close games, and I think Philly is definitely live here at plus 160. I think they're getting undervalued at the very least.
Hey, Paul, best money line bet, your favorite money line bet tonight?
On the face of it, you guys are going to think I'm nuts when I say I take Columbus over Washington. But we're talking about a Capitals team that's impacted by the absence of 3 of their top 6 forwards. Narrow wins against bottom-feeding clubs like Buffalo and Detroit have been offset by 3 losses against better clubs in the last 5 games that have exposed the Caps in this period where they've been short-handed a little bit. Meanwhile, the Jackets come into tonight's game well-rested and coming off a sweep of a home and away set against a very good Colorado club. I'm taking the home side to win at a plus 110 payoff tonight.
Game total. Which one are you targeting, Paul?
I got a couple of games for you, Emerson. I see it as a point tonight in Buffalo with Edmonton rolling over the home side. The line is set at 6 goals. I think it's going to be a lot higher scoring game. That's in part because I still see the Oilers with a less than ordinary defensive ability, and they will be starting their third stringer, Stuart Skinner. Meanwhile, Edmonton's offense will do significant offensive damage, as we're implying. So I don't go to the alternate line of 7.5 for a 255 payoff in that one. I see also a high-scoring game in the Hall of Fame tilt tonight in Toronto, more than the current line of 5.5 because there will be a lot of offensive skill on display, much of it coming from a Toronto side that's won 6 of their last 7, and I think the visitors will get at least a couple too. Don't forget they're playing their second-string goalie tonight as well, as I mentioned earlier. I take the alternate line at plus 125 to go over that 6.5 prop.
Jeff, give me that game total, dude.
Yeah, as mentioned before, I mean, I like a close game between Philly and Carolina here. You got 2 teams good defensively so far, especially in net for the Philadelphia Flyers. So I like getting plus money at under 5.5 goals. The under's gone under. The under's hit in each of Philly's last 5 games, and I agree with Paul. I think this Flames Maple Leafs total is just too low. I mean, I'll just take the over at 5.5 goals, but you got a backup goalie. I think you've got the Leafs. Played a little bit better in the last start, but Austin Matthews is a good spot for him. It feels like the Flames defensively, maybe just like they're just due for a little bit of regression too, on an Eastern Conference road trip. Sometimes you always get these Western teams. They just have one terrible night. And I definitely feel like the Leafs could get off here. Like Paul mentioned, there's some good narratives around it too. I like going over in Calgary, Toronto, and I like the under in Philly, Carolina.
All right, guys, need you to be quick here on player prop. Jeff, go ahead.
Jacob Chychrun to score a goal. This is a player who's scored 30 times the last 2 seasons in like 118 games. He's 13 games without a goal. He's got like 40 shots on net. This is going to happen. And look, Chicago gives up tons of scoring chances. So Jacob Chychrun plus 360 to score a goal tonight.
All right, Paul, bring us home.
It's a very chalky thing to say McDavid or Draisaitl. I'm going to fade both of them, and I'd rather see a bigger payoff in the same game from Puljujarvi or Hyman. at plus 195 and plus 175 respectively to bulge the twine for the visitors. I also spoke about Vinnie Trojek earlier, coming in on that heater. He's on a great team centering their top power play and facing a Philly club that I still think is suspect defensively, despite all that Jeff said. That looks like a promising scenario for a plus 200 payoff when my cousin Vinny scores tonight.
All right, guys, great job. And thank you so much, Jeff, for being in almost every segment today. It was great co-hosting this show with you. Everybody, there's a Friday edition of the Slate at 5 o'clock. I'm not sure who's on it, but it will be entertaining.
Not me.
Oh, are you not you?
It's not me.
Okay, cool. Good for you, man. Enjoy a little afternoon off. Hang out with your dog and those children. Madden at noon. Slate kicks off then. Enjoy it. Peace.